That's how typically people think. If I have, let's say, $100, right, and I know that in those $100 I can get 10 developers, let's say, I would not want to add a guy. Without the thoroughness, to be honest, testing is pretty useless in my opinion. For one of the customers, it was a banking customer. So we did an exercise. We figured out that we could stop 33% of the defects at the development level before they are even ready for testing if they have used us in the requirement stage. Thank you, Caden, for having me on the show. My name is Khurram. I'm the founder of Kualitee, which is a software testing consulting company, and Quality, which is a test management platform. Also, I have been an investor in startups and happy to be on the show. Would love to see where we can take the show from here.
Could you tell me a little bit more about your background, like what you've done professionally and why and what you do? Like why, like what
Sure.
you do, and then why do you do it?
I started my career as a professional in software testing, specifically back in 2001. And I really liked the concept of software testing specifically because it's more about thinking how a user thinks about a software and how they use it. And I found it to be more liberating and more creative.
How would you, like, if you're coaching a product manager, and like how would I like conceptualize that part of the process better so that I could actually be more helpful?
Yeah. So look, I am in a way performing the role of a product manager too these days, because the product I talked about, I'm the one who is leading that product side, right? Now, it's one thing when you're sitting in as a testing team and you look at the problem, and then when you sit like a product manager, you see the issues and the challenges. For example, if you have a feature request from an enterprise customer, for example, right? And the priority just goes over there. So as a product manager, your resources are always less. You have to juggle between the features and the testing and then the bug fixing and all of that. As a product manager, I've understood how testing needs to slightly adjust more towards not just the UAT part, but how they can quickly find those issues. How can they make the process more repeatable and more deeper as well? Because the cost of the bug that a customer reports is just really high now. Your support team gets engaged, developers get engaged. And also what, as product managers, I've seen we struggle when we find an issue through a customer, for example, when you have not done a proper testing lifecycle internally, is that your whole focus of development also shifts with that. So it's very critical that you have a very solid QA process put in place before you even go for UAT in some products. Even if you are doing a unit level testing, that is one way of testing an application, but then you need to have independent people who are not business users. UAT is more also when business users are also testing at the same time. And their time is also very critical. So you need to have some teams in between post-development, pre-UAT, who have this deeper insight into how the testing as a process has to work. And they can help you identify more issues and of course also highlight some of the potential issues that may come up before they go for UAT or before they go to the end user or the business level. So I think testing has become more agile now. If I were to compare from when I started to now, I think testing is far more about agility right now. Everybody takes testing as, can we save some hours from testing and put them in development? And like, how can we reduce time from testing and add to maybe, again, the development of the design part. So I think testing is getting really less and less time. And that's why I think testing as a unit has to evolve and adapt and grow faster too. And I think that's where, in my opinion, some of the ways in which AI can help are beneficial. Like we still need to see how it turns out eventually. But generally speaking, this is how testing, in my opinion, is going to change and has evolved as well, at both at unit testing level and at the quality level overall.
So let me make sure I understand, like when you bring in a testing function, it should almost precede UAT because they can capture more errors faster, especially like leveraging automated testing software and stuff like that. So that by the time it's like right about ready to ship, that's when the product manager could come in and do like final like user acceptance testing.
Yes.
Instead of trying to do it. Like that, I think that's
Because
been like my big mistake.
Yeah, because let's put dollar value to the time that a product manager or a CTO or a CEO. I speak to a lot of startups and I constantly see the CTOs and the product managers are trying to test the application, right? Now, if you start putting in the dollar value in terms of the time they're spending on testing versus having somebody who is skilled and who is just doing that kind of work, and also bringing in the focus. I think whether as a product manager, your focus is diluted between design and the development and the customer support and the customer success then, right? It's always everywhere. And having that kind of specialized focus person doing things for you. And then as a product manager, as CTO or CEO, maybe you can come in and evaluate where the product stands. That is definitely a lot of, that's also important for in terms of the cost value, but also in terms of the focus that you get by having that kind of person in the team. Yeah.
But there is like a point of like just making sure that, hey, there's like a final like fit and finish check at the very end of the process.
Yeah. And also one more thing is not just the redundancy part. I think the other critical aspect is when somebody comes in with a more focus. So where is software testing more valuable? In my opinion and in my experience, if you cannot trace your test cases to, for example, your user stories, and you see there are missing links, that testing is an incomplete testing. At the very heart of software testing is, in my opinion, the most important concept is traceability. You should be able to establish traceability between each and every business need, business requirement, or user story to your test cases, and hence, and only then you will know if you have executed your testing properly or not. Without the thoroughness, to be honest, testing is pretty useless in my opinion. You will always have bugs which will be pushed out. You will think that you are testing. Basically, it's not really the right way of doing testing. And at the end of the day, you will have struggle with your customers. You will struggle with the developers. Developers will feel frustrated, to be honest, if the testing is not done properly, and also customers will feel frustrated. So again, it's very critical to look at testing as a function, which is a very critical part of your development lifecycle, and you cannot ignore it.
And then we'll hire a couple of QA people.
Yeah. So I think primarily it's because there is pressure from the investors and even the market sometimes to push more features. And everybody thinks that they need to roll out more and more features. And hence, if I have, let's say, $100, right? And I know that in those $100, I can get 10 developers, let's say, right? So I would just try to figure out a way to do or to use those $100 for 10 developers. I would not want to add a QA guy. That's how typically people think. They only start thinking about QA when they go through the first release and the customers come back to them with some defect. And then they start incorporating testing as a process into their development process. And I think that's where a lot of people have been working in this fashion. And I think this is changing now because every product has a competition. It's a stiff competition now. And you can't roll out a buggy product and you can't expect people to be using those products anymore.
Could you walk me through a time where QA reframed the problem? An example for maybe with your client work or anything like that.
Yeah, so I think there was this startup, and this back like 6-7 years ago when I was actively looking at each and every customer that was coming our way. And this was more like a hands-on experience that I had. They came to us with the problem that their application is not responding, right? So they came to us with the problem that we have some customers reporting us that our application is slow. When we started testing, we figured out that this is a potential problem of performance. Now, the interesting bit with performance testing is that performance can be an issue of the software and it can be an issue of the hardware and be an issue of the middleware as well, right? So we had to isolate the problem from hardware, and we figured out the problem is actually in the software right now. And when we dug deep, I still remember that for that application, we also went through the code review exercise because we figured out that this is a software level problem. And in the code review, we figured out that there is a problem with the architecture of the application. And we can keep fixing it and we can spend as much time as you want, but this is not going to result in any net improvement like down the road. As your application is growing, it's becoming more and more complex. You have more and more users coming in. So you need to figure out the architecture level of that. That is one particular case where I clearly remember that we advised the customer that you probably need to build a parallel team and look at the architecture of the application and maybe start working on some other architecture than what you're using right now. So that is one example that I have absolutely never forgotten because it started as a problem statement of users not happy with my product to figuring out that it's also an architecture issue.
Yeah. Does QA, do you try to have your employees, is it a thing to have QA functional prototypes or live data prototypes?
I think if you bring in QA early, this is the best thing you can do for your own product, the earlier you engage them. So let me take a step back. Let's not think QA as a technical software engineer. Let's think of this person as somebody who is going to look at your application like an end user. Okay, so this guy can be your beta user. He can be your friend who is supposed to test your application. Will use your application. Let's not even use the word test here. This person is going to use your application. If you don't bring this guy up to the speed on what the product is supposed to do, and you don't give them enough time and enough understanding of how the product is supposed to work as a user, they cannot really look into this application and give you any valuable feedback. They may be able to tell you this form is not working, this field is not working, my submit button is not working, but that even a CTO can figure out. I think if you want really to drive value from QA teams, you have to bring them at very early stage when you're defining your user stories and when you're thinking of, okay, what kind of business challenges I'm trying to solve through this product. And the earlier they understand, the better test cases they can write, the better traceability they can bring into your application testing lifecycle, and hence you can find defects much more earlier. For one of the customers, it was a banking customer. So we did an exercise. We figured out how many bugs were coming into the digital banking app. We figured out when they brought us in early into and we had to actually present them the case that your idea of bringing us is actually not helping you guys. We figured out that we could stop 33% of the defects at the development level before they are even ready for testing if they have used us in the requirement stage. But what if the same guy comes to you and says, listen, I have played this game and this is how probably you can improve this game. See, that is a value problem. That is not a cost problem then. So QA shift, in my opinion, from a cost center to a value center the moment you start thinking of QA as not just somebody finding me issues. It's can they help me improve the product in terms of the usage, in terms of the way it comes across to an end user. And suddenly you don't see QA anymore as I'm spending like hundreds of thousands of dollars on QA. You think of, I am helping my sales team generate more dollars because my product is loved by my end users. And there is a significant chunk of that thing that comes in from the QA side. And it should come from the QA side also. It shouldn't be just about logging in defects.